Welcome to Building Inclusive Digital Communities with Josh Hotzenpiller and Megan Martin. Discover how that human connection actually accelerates business objectives. Get ready to transform and grow.
Welcome, everyone, to another wonderful episode of Building Inclusive Digital Communities. And we are thrilled to have another community expert and an event expert with us today, Liz King-Caruso. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
We're so excited. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about your company. Where are you based in the U.S.? Tell us about Liz.
Sure. So I live in New York, just about an hour north of New York City. And I do two main things. One is event planning for our clients. We mostly work with thought leaders and people who have communities of their own, which is funny, to host events for them, to plan their events. So it's mostly conferences and things like that, networking events, things like that. And then we've also been building a community of our own since 2010 when we started the company, really designed for event planners. We host an annual conference called Techsy Talk Global that is a space for event planners to learn about technology and kind of more forward-thinking ideas. But we do have an ongoing community where we share resources. So we have like a larger community that's open to the whole industry, and then a smaller one that's specific only to event planners, which is kind of our more niche group. So we do both of those things and really love the work that we get to do every day. It's a very fast-paced moving beast that we're trying to tame all the time, but it's fun.
Well, I think that's awesome. Like you talk about, you've been building community since 2010. You were one of the first to build your own community for your clients, the meeting planning industry as a whole. And one of the things we talked about in our prep call just a little bit ago was the many iterations of your community. So talk to me, start from the beginning in 2010, when you were thinking about a community, what did that look like? And then what does it look like now? Like what has the last almost 13 years of your community building look like?
So it started, if you remember in 2010, what was really popular back then were like meetup.com and things like that. So that's how our community started, was in New York, very local, and all in person, really. It was designed around building relationships. And for me, it started because I was new to the industry and I was new to everything events. And I wanted to get to know people in New York. And I was young and single and I didn't care. I was out every night. I was like, let's meet some people. Let's figure out what's going on. So we were doing these monthly events at a venue or at a different location, and we bring planners together. And so it became that kind of meetup format where we were building a list of people who had come to our events, and then we would let them know about the next one. And we were making really great relationships. And there was, even back then, a digital component, because when we did our first conference, which was 2010, we did live stream it because there were people who were part of our community, even in the New York area, who couldn't come, or there would be people Connecticut, New Jersey, like it was still fairly local. Over the years, we've tried to go in all these different places. So we've built our newsletter, which, is kind of the mailing list of the people who have come over time. And then that's evolved. We have Facebook group. We've done a LinkedIn group. We've done a Slack channel. We now have evolved to kind of a hybrid of a Facebook community and something called Circle, which I don't know if, how familiar people are with that. We're really trying to be where people are to some extent, which is why we have still the Facebook community. But over the years, we've realized the challenge with being tied to social networks, which is that, there's a lot of challenges, I'm sure you know. So,
well, I think the biggest let's talk about that. I want to dive into that for a second, because it's something I hear a lot when talking to our customers or even prospects. And they're like, well, we have a Facebook group, that's a community. And I'm like, but you don't own any of that information. Like you can't really get, you can moderate it and, control the conversation. But at the end of the day, that platform owns that community. It's not really your community. So talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges, and then we'll dive back into your timeline of building, because I'm fascinated by it. But this is a really hot topic that I think more people need to talk about, like why sometimes building on a social platform isn't the best way. Like it's a great way to start a community, but in long-term strategy, it's not the best.
Well, the first point is exactly what you said, which is that you don't own the community. So with Facebook, for example, we've kind of hacked it because there are 3 questions that you can ask people before they can join. And one of them is email address. Otherwise, you don't even know how to communicate with the people in your community. They're in there, and then you post something. And the last statistic I heard, at least, was that when you post something in a community, 8% actually see it in their news feed. And the rest, Facebook wants you to pay basically to reach the rest of your audience through ads and promoting your posts and promoting all these things. They're making their money that way. So
you're at the mercy of the algorithm.
yeah. And the truth is, people are opting in. It's always it made me crazy that Facebook and other social platforms make you pay to reach people who've already opted in. I could see if you want to grow your audience, but that's not even the issue. The other thing is that, habits do change. And Facebook, for example, has been around for a really long time. We are seeing more and more of our audience who are leaving Facebook. And really they're going towards other platforms, which I think are great for community, like TikTok and Instagram, but they're not great from an organizer standpoint.
Right.
Being able to understand who's in it, where are they, and for them to know where your community is. So that is a huge challenge. And the other thing is really knowing what you want to do from a value standpoint, what you want to provide to your community. Facebook and other platforms don't always make that easy. For example, we have tons of past content that we would love to be able to share the videos, tag them, let people dive in and really find stuff that's relevant. It's just a dump on Facebook. It's not very organized. There's not a great member directory. We can't let people search for another planner in New York who they might be able to partner with. So there's a lot of flexibility that we get from a different platform that, we just don't get from any kind of social platform.
Yeah. I agree with all of those things. So back to your timeline. So we're established now, have your Facebook group, you're connecting people beyond New York. Maybe you're starting to do, when did your big global conference start coming into play with the community? How did that fit into the strategy?
So we started it started as Planner Tech, which was, we did it twice a year for 2 years. And that was a really small in-person New York event, although we did live stream it. And that was back 2010-11. Then we decided to turn it into a full day conference. So we changed it into Texi Talk, and that eventually became the whole company name. And even our event planning runs through that now. And then we called it Texi Talk Global when the pandemic hit, because then we did it virtually and we started really seeing our community. We had already built the community globally because we had these Facebook groups and Slack groups and stuff from 2000, I would say 17, 16 on. Sure. But that's when the conference really took on that more global perspective, because we didn't do any in-person component. We still, at this point, are not doing in-person.
That's interesting. And so talk a little bit about how expanding the reach beyond the New York area, I've never lived in New York, but I've been familiar with Texi Talk and all of that as you started to expand outside. So I've learned about you for a couple of years in your community. So when you started thinking about global, how did that inclusive approach still play into your community? Because purpose of the podcast talking about inclusivity, that's a lot of what community is. We want to push the narrative further than, well, we invited everyone to the party. That's not Sure. So inclusive. If I don't feel like I belong at the party, it's nice to be invited, but is that really my people, my place? Am I comfortable going there? Which is really the heart of inclusivity. And so when you started thinking global, how did that play into were you intentional about who you were inviting, what types of people were coming, because now you have the whole world and not just the New York metro area. So how did that factor? I mean, I can only imagine it was a lot.
Yeah. So when we had built this community in New York, and then people just kept joining it, and it really didn't matter if they were from New York or not. And it was really around 2016, 2017, when we started looking at the list and saying wow, there are people from all over the world in this group. We really should take this into consideration. So, yeah. But at that point, all of our events were still in person. So when in 2020, we decided, okay, this is going to be fully virtual. We're going to do something for this global community, we rebranded as Texty Talk Global, then yes, then there's a lot of other things that you think about. So time zones obviously being one, trying to offer things at the most optimal time zones as possible. Also making the on-demand content instantly available so that if someone was just waking up or had been whatever, they're in meetings all day, they were able to quickly tune in and not feel like they've missed a lot that other people in the community have already taken on. We partnered with a company called Wordly last year for our Texty Talk Global conference to translate in real time. I think at that time it was 16 plus languages. So all of our conference content was transcript, but then also, offered these languages. And we had an ASL interpreter. So we really started spending a lot more attention to, is this content can everyone participate? And is it in a way that everyone can handle? We've always done really fast, fast-paced short sessions. And so also really thinking through, like this year, one of the things we're doing, which is another level of inclusivity and not necessarily specific to the global piece, but we're partnering with Storycraft Labs on their experience profiles. So we're having everyone take this quiz and it tells you what kind of experience you prefer. And then we're tagging all of our sessions and we'll be delivering to people like Liz, no surprise, I'm a thinker. Here's the sessions at Texty Talk Global that will most resonate with you. And we took some time in our agenda planning to weigh, is there enough for a creator? Is there enough for a seeker? Is there enough for a thinker? And really, so we're offering different kinds of networking experiences. So out of the 3-day conference coming up this year, we have one that's spatial networking, one that's one-to-one speed dating format, one that's more open Zoom type, everyone can chat, so that people can kind of tune in not only at the times that work for them, but in the ways that they most enjoy receiving the content.
I'm not surprised that you're a thinker, and I am a seeker.
Are you?
I went through a Storycraft Lab experience this summer at I think EduCon, and
great.
I still have my little thing right here on my desk that I reference every once in a while. But
nice.
I love that you're thinking not just about making the content accessible and inclusive for everybody to access, but also their own learning styles. Because I just saw Sarab did a poll on LinkedIn the other day. It said, how do you like to consume your thought leadership content? And it was like listening, reading, I don't even remember, participating. And there was like 4 options. And listening was the highest one, which kind of surprised me a little bit. But again, that goes to like, everybody wants it a little bit differently, and how I have some people on our staff that respond really well when they get video messages. And so there's some people that instead of sending an email, I'll record a quick video and send it off, as opposed to the email where, we have other people who have like journalism backgrounds and they're like, don't send me a video, I'm not going to listen to it. But if I write them 5-paragraph email, like they'll get every nugget out of that email. So I love that you guys are approaching it that way. And are you still focused on like event planner specific for your community and your outreach?
Yes. So we do have, and I think there's a lot of value. Our largest community is our Texty Talk community, which is open to anyone in the industry, not planner specific. And I think there's a ton of value in something like that. And then our smaller communities, the collaborative, we found, for example, that people are saying, we want to build our own community. What platform should we use? In the community, it's every platform. We could do it. We could do it. We could do it. It's like not what planners want to know. They want to know what another planner has actually used and liked. And so we get more of that conversation, and a safer space to say, this contract is going awry. How can I save it for my client or whatever? And that's important. So I think it's important to us to build both. And so our focus is really just continuing to grow both in an engagement standpoint, not necessarily number of people.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think the other piece of community that a lot of people, they want to be inclusive, and they think that means inviting everyone. And to truly be inclusive, I think you have to exclude some people in your community. Like, this is not a target audience for you. Like, you creating those subgroups, like, yes, you have your big Texty Talk community, but then there's a space just for planners to engage. And I think that is at the core of inclusion, and especially community, is like, we might be part of the bigger ecosystem, but I still have my own very individual interests like within that. And so part of community, I think, is creating those subspaces for people to have those moments. Are there any other like subgroups or subcategories within your community that you focus on?
No, not specifically, actually. No.
Interesting. No, I love that. I think that is exactly the right approach. I think it's awesome. So when you think about future growth with your community, what does that look like? Because you just hit on, it's not about number of people, but the number of engagements. And so how do you measure that? What does growth look like? Where do you want this community to go in the future?
So our biggest focus right now in terms of growth is growing our off social media platform, making sure that as many people as possible know that that is a space that happens. And then, yes, engagement is another big thing that we're focused on, and really thinking about quantity of content and delivery of the method. So we have up to this point been doing monthly events and everyone can kind of tune in. We're realizing that.
Can you clarify, is that in person or digital?
Oh, sorry, all virtual. Yes.
All virtual. Okay.
Even that is a lot for people because there's so much content out there. And so we're playing with, should it be a little less frequent, but then on top of that, layering in, one thing that we do is every call that we have is recorded. And so we share the video and the audio. And then we also have like a Cliff Notes version, someone who was physically there just taking notes of what happened, and then the transcript so that people literally could kind of digest it the way they want. And so one of our growth tactics is to really look at analytics around those 4 types and see what is it that people are doing. Are they listening to the podcast? For Techsy Talk Global, we're going to release all of the session content as its own podcast so that people could kind of binge listen through 20 sessions, and just see. I think that's the way a lot of people like to consume their content. So really focused on the quality of the interactions, and then potentially from that being able to raise the price because we can offer more value with a highly engaged and targeted community.
Yeah, I love all of that. And I think one of the other things you're doing in talking about the data and putting out the different ways to consume one piece of content, you get very experimental with a lot of the things that you guys do. I think that's one thing I love about Techsy Talk is you guys try a lot of different things to see. And I think one conversation I have pretty frequently is people get afraid to get experimental with their community. And they think that they have to set a strategy and then stick to it for a long period of time to even know if it's working. And I'm not sure that's the best approach, but where do you find the balance between having consistency, like we were talking about your weekly like talk show that you guys do, a group of you, but then also getting experimental with like doing Cliff Notes or micro content, different types of content. So where do you find that balance between the two?
Yeah, I think I have a hard time with it because I like a lot of new ideas, like to try a lot of different things. And I move.
That's why you're the thinker.
Yeah. But we've always operated our business from like a lean startup model, like start really small, build it really fast, change all the time. And I do think there is some merit, especially in a community, to the consistency of what to expect. What I have found though, even with our weekly podcast, and I did my podcast weekly for 3 years. And I really, I had to kind of like look at the numbers and say like, look, people are not putting this on their calendar and thinking, oh, wait, Liz is going to be live in 3 minutes. Got to go watch that. They're listening to the audio. So we ended up just taking it off and doing it audio only. And so I think it's a fine balance between deciding what you think is the best strategy based on all the information that you have, sticking with it for a short term, meaning like 3 months at a minimum, but then looking intently at the data to see whether or not that's something, and not being afraid a month and a half in to say, I thought this was the way, but we're literally getting 0 engagements. We need to shift. But I think I don't think there's a right answer. It's just kind of a dance and art of what you think is right. Even this circle community that we have that's off social media, I know for us as a brand who's hosting the community, this is where we need to be to offer the value that we want. Convincing people to go there and to spend time there and to remember to go there, that's a whole other piece. And that's really where our commitment has come in. But I think so there are some things that this is where we need to be. And I'm going to stick with it no matter how much resistance we get. But on the other side, being flexible, of course, to change when you start to get the vibe that it's just not going to work.
Yeah, I think that's great. So talk to me about some of the stuff you've gotten experimental, like maybe one thing that was a huge success that you're still doing, and maybe something that like failed miserably that you abandoned quickly.
So one of the interesting things that worked really well was these open format discussions. So monthly, what I would do is just assign a topic, which was based on a poll that I
Okay.
would do the week before. So like, what's on your mind? And I would choose some topics based on what's been in the feed. And then people could add topics and they could vote for them, whatever one, that was the topic. And there was no moderator other than me. I had nothing to talk about. And we would just say like, okay, you guys said you wanted to talk about contracts. Like, what are we talking about today? And it was by far the most engaging and successful event type that we've done. We've also tried sponsored content. We've tried just content that I think is really important. And I bring in speakers to give more structure to the conversation. It never gets the same kind of attendance or engagement. So that's something that we tried that worked really, really well. We've tried a lot of things that don't work well at all. One of the hardest pieces for me, like a big fail that we had just last week, is knowing how to communicate what's happening to our community, just because people are signing up like on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on this place, on that place. And I'm trying to, like, behind the scenes, me and my tiny team are like, okay, this person signed up. Are they on the newsletter? Are they here? Are they there? So we had some success using Google Invites to kind of hold the time, because people are saying like, I miss it in Facebook that you created an event for this monthly thing, or I missed it over here, and they're just not participating. So we did, for our Texie Talk Global conference, send out a calendar invite to the people on our list. And I don't even really know what happened, but it just started sending invites like 20 at a time in people's inboxes. And then I was getting all these emails like, I don't know why I'm getting so many invites from you. I'm like, I don't either. I don't know if it was the technology. I don't know. I don't know what we were doing because we hadn't touched it. So we ended up having to just like delete it. I had thousands of emails in my inbox because I started getting all the bounce backs from people getting too many emails. I'm
Right.
sure my email's like blacklisted in the industry or something. It's a huge issue, but that is a challenge for us, is just communicating what's happening with the people who at some point have opted in. We're not, and knowing for them whether they're in or out, or we know whether they're in or out. We have not solved that problem for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, like, do you even want to hear from us? Like, are you ghosting
Yeah, I
me
don't know.
about this? It's like this weird dating game that you're playing, like with your community members.
And
But you
there's so
talked
many
about something.
lurkers,
Yes, they.
which is a good thing. You mentioned that, the people like to listen. And so we don't really know. The data definitely is not that specific that like Liz is listening all the time. She just doesn't talk. I'm like, I don't know if you're listening or you hate us. I don't, so
Right.
it's a challenge.
Well, I think I had this conversation with another community manager a couple weeks ago about the balance between having super engaged members and then having also lurkers, because it takes both of them to have a vibrant ecosystem. Like, if you even think about like the food chain ecosystem, if we're going to get like real granular about this, like not everyone can be a lion, like going out there eating everyone. Like, you have to have the bunny rabbits too, right? It takes both lurkers and super engaged members to have a really robust community. So I love that you kind of hit on both of them, and you still engage those lurkers because they don't want to be forgotten about just because they don't participate. There's still value. They just maybe don't want to raise their hand, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Last couple of questions. One thing you actually just hit on it, so it's a great transition, was involving your community in the decision-making process around topics, content. You just mentioned that you poll your community for the weekly talks. How else do you leverage them to help drive the direction of where the community is going to go?
So a lot of it is harnessing their knowledge. So one of the things I'm very conscious about doing, just did it last night, is whenever I have a business challenge or an event, something that I need, I make sure that I'm asking our community first about it, and really creating opportunities for them to provide their knowledge and value. And other people do it, of course, other people ask, but I think as the person who hosts it, it's important that I'm not always the one like they're giving the answers, but that I am constantly saying like, we just had this issue. Anyone have an idea? I'm looking for someone who can work on this project. So that's one thing. Finding ways for people to get together. For example, when we staff our events, we work directly. The first request is always in that group, like who's available at this location, this city, whatever. But also just for natural meetups, being able to make sure people are connecting with each other when they go to events, or with us when we go to an event and they can meet up with us. The other thing I think in terms of letting the community drive though, and this is something we're focused on a lot for 2023, is actually having them be a part of the driving the content in a more practical sense. So actually hiring a few of them as community managers who can say, this month I think the topic should be this, and they can run with it and choose the speaker, or decide they don't want a speaker, or whatever the format is, and be able to set all of that up and run it. I think is a key for me in terms of growth, but it's also a big way that I think is important to make sure that they see the value and they get value for being so engaged in the community. But also I think the community will value that it's yet another planner who's on this team who's giving some content and sharing their insights.
Yeah, they're kind of becoming like your own like community advisory board, if you will. Like we have those elsewhere. I absolutely love that. So last question as we're rounding out today is like, we've talked a lot about different platforms, how to engage your community, different ideas, how to pull your members in, but how do you leverage technology to accomplish all of this? And I know you guys are somewhat platform agnostic, like you explore a lot of different ones. So how, in my opinion, a lot of planners lead first of like, let me go find the technology, where I've always had the approach of like, this is what I need done. Now let me go find the technology that achieves that, versus, well, this is the platform I like, let's build around what it's capable of. So how do you approach technology in your community to achieve those goals?
Yeah, it's super complicated because as you said, we're constantly changing platforms and trying new things and doing things. But it is very much always, I've been an advocate of what you're saying, which is know where you want your community to be, know what the non-negotiables are. You really want to provide X, Y, and Z. I mentioned things earlier, like the member community or a video library. Whatever it is for your community, know what those things are, and then look for the technology that supports that. And you want to find something that, first of all, most aligns with what you're looking for. Second of all, has an amazing team that you love working with, because there's always going to be some kind of technical glitch. There's always going to be something that doesn't quite fit and you need to build around it. And that's totally
sending
fine.
thousands of Gmail calendar invites.
Yeah, I don't have a rep at Google, but I wish I did. But you need someone who can call in those panic moments and they can help you work through it. Or, that they're going to say, we can do 95% of what you need, but this 5% we're going to have to build around. And you need someone that you can trust, knows what the heck they're doing when they do that. But you are looking, I think, for at least an 85% direct fit with what you want. And the technology, I don't think you're going to get 100% all the time. But you don't want like a 40 or 50%, those companies that are like, well, we don't do that, but we could shift our technology and we could do it this way and we could build this and build that. It usually doesn't work out well in my experience.
Don't disagree with that. And have you seen, as technology evolves, as your community is evolving, moving from platform to platform with your community, but still connecting them, what is their response to that? Because we see that a lot now where they're like, well, we started small over here, but I'm worried if we migrate to a new system or a new platform, I'm going to lose people because they already know where to go find me here, like a Facebook group or page or something like that, to then move them into a real robust with their own platform, kind of like your circle. What does the community response to that as you're, evolving with the times and the tech?
You will lose people. And I think what I've learned over the years is that it's more of like it's more my issue wanting a certain number of people in our community than it is the people's issue. As long as we've communicated it, we've said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. Here we go. We're doing it. We're doing it. Everyone come along. You've been invited. Reminder, you've been invited. Okay, we're here. If they ignore all of that, or they don't care, or they don't get it, they weren't that involved in the first place. And so we almost have now used that as a filter. We also very much communicate with our community to know this is what we do. We're going to keep evolving. We're going to keep moving. We're going to keep taking you where we think is the best. And you have to kind of trust us with that. We've done like crazy things like unsubscribe people, like send them an email and say, if you don't respond to this right now, then you'll be unsubscribed from the list, and like constantly filtering. And to the point earlier of not being so worried about quantity in your group. If you want just the core people who are really involved and that's where the value is, then you don't have to drive yourself so crazy about losing whatever percent is not paying any attention to what you're doing.
I mean, I feel like you likely could have lost them at any point along the way anyway.
You've
And
already
I
lost
love that
them.
you use
Yeah,
that as the filter. I think that's great.
exactly. You've
Awesome.
lost them. If they don't see that you're moving and I mean, obviously no one's going to say it once and then be done with it. Like
Sure.
you're sending multiple things, you're communicating in different ways and they're not getting the message. You've already lost them.
Yeah.
They just happen to be a name on your list.
No, makes a lot of sense. So final question, wrapping up. Final thoughts, advice for someone who wants to start a community. So an organization or someone got voluntold of like, we need a community for our organization, go build one for us. Any advice for those people just starting out into the event and community space?
Yeah, I love those voluntold scenarios. I think the biggest thing is focus on why someone would want to be part of your community. What is the value that you're offering? Sometimes I think the biggest thing right now is to push back and say it's really not a good idea. That does not mean I don't think people should be starting communities, but there are a billion out there. And there's a lot of brands trying to push into that space to sell a product. And that's not a good reason to start a community, in my opinion. So really understanding what are you offering that someone would need to the point where they want to see it all the time, 365 days in their inboxes and in their social channels and whatever. And if there's something there, then start small and stay consistent. The biggest thing with community is the longevity of it. You are not going to build 5,000 engaged members overnight. It's going to take you years to get to those numbers. And it's a constant, everything from here to 10 years from now is an iteration. It's changing constantly, but the consistency is the purpose and the value of the group, who's in the group in terms of target market. And you have to stay consistent with that. It's easy to get discouraged, especially these days in the community game, because there's so many and people are moving around so much.
Sure.
But if you have a conviction as to why what you're creating is a space that people really need to be a part of, then you need to just keep pushing until you get the right people in the group. Yeah. And if you have to iterate 1,000 times to get the right people in that group, that's fine, but just don't give up quickly, because it's a long game for sure.
Yeah, but I love your advice of starting small and staying consistent. I think that's the key to success with any organization that wants to start a community. So I think that's absolutely great advice for someone starting out. Well, Liz, thank you so much. This was an amazing conversation. We've talked about all different kinds of things, starting community, good things about it, bad things about it, experimental things. So I really want to thank you for your time. It was an absolutely lovely conversation, and hope to have you on a future episode to catch in and see what's happening with your community.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you on the next episode of Building Inclusive Digital Communities. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us. Let this story inspire you to the serious work needed to build an inclusive digital community that makes a difference for your network and your brand. For more conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to the show at junolive.com/podcast. Don't forget to share this show with your network so we can all learn from each other how to build inclusive communities. We'll be talking more about this episode on LinkedIn, where you'll find us under Juno Live. See you on the next episode.